Good evening, children of the night. Today, in the spirit of Samhain, I am going to make a video about my experiences as a witch and my path and practice. Before we begin, I do want to show off this, which is my latest dye project, and since I've been experimenting with shibori, which is essentially Japanese dyeing, sort of tie-dye, but a lot more involved. This is my latest one that I'm really proud of. Yeah, I'll wear that one. This is going to be, everybody is getting these for Christmas this year. Yule, my apologies. Alright, so there probably are a couple corners of the multiverse where I wouldn't have ended up a witch. However, I think that it would have been unlikely. Where to begin? Well, I could begin with Rebecca Nurse, who I am a direct descendant of in my father's side. She was one of the women who was hanged as a witch during the Salem Witch Trials, which, I've seen a couple of pieces of media, and maybe a few books, I think, bringing up Salem ancestry as making somebody predisposed towards witchcraft. I know Coven, season of Coven of American Horror Story did that, and I think I don't want to use the word stupid because it's not nice, but I think it could have been thought through a little bit more, because none of the people who were killed in Salem were witches. In fact, I think it's unlikely that anybody who was executed for being a witch actually practiced any kind of witchcraft. Nevertheless, if that is a qualifier, it is one of mine. Rebecca Nurse was specifically interesting to me because most of the people who were accused of witchcraft at that time were had feuds with people, or were out. Sarah Good was homeless, I think. Some of the other people were just not very involved in the community, but Rebecca Nurse was widely adored. She was loved. She was a pillar of the community. She was older than anybody else who was killed, and however, she did have a land dispute with a local family, or no. I think what happened was this guy's pigs got into her cabbage patch or something, and she did very much publicly curse the owner of the pigs to die within a week, and he very much did die within a week. Probably a coincidence. Maybe not. I don't know, but that does, of course, that was why she was accused. However, obviously she did not ever practice witchcraft. So there's that. And then I grew up in Sleepy Hollow, New York. Yeah, that's Sleepy Hollow, which where the legend of Sleepy Hollow took place, and that's a big deal in the town. I grew up 2 blocks away from the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, and I spent a lot of time, especially when there was periods of time that I just wasn't going to school as a teenager, and I would just wander the graveyard all day, cultivating goth cred in my trench coat. And I think that probably did it. But I'm not sure when I started really being into witchcraft. It was really early though. In grade school, my friend and I, 2 friends and I did have 2 friends at one point, and we did start a coven, which was just we tried to connect to the tree spirits that were growing in the recess field, which was very sweet. And then one of those friends and I wrote a spell that was essentially the embodiment of, don't you just want to go apeshit? It was releasing the inner, going feral, sort of releasing the inner wild animal in you, and then almost like a berserker kind of thing, just not battle associated. And there was also, it might have been sparked by there was this one guy, a local historian, who would do tours through the graveyard, because there are a number of historically significant graves there, and some incredible, like the Rockefellers have a mausoleum there that's gorgeous. And he was in talking about various historical facts about the graveyard. He mentioned a woman whose name was Hulda the Witch, and this is professional historian. So like, you know, I did sort of look around on the internet to see if I could find any more stuff about her, but I did not. Hulda the Witch was apparently abandoned by her family during a native raid. I think it was the Wickwaiesgek who lived in that area at the time, and so she was adopted and raised by the Wickwaiesgek, and ended up living alone in the middle of the woods in a cabin. And it seems unlikely that she actually practiced witchcraft, but she's still a personal hero of mine because it sounds like she was autistic. One of the reasons that people believed that she was a witch was that she did have, you know, an outdoor cauldron just cooking stuff, and she would sing to herself while she was just going about her work. But her voice, there was something weird about her voice where it was monotone, like it didn't like do notes or melodies or anything like that, and so people thought that she was chanting. And then this solitary unmarried woman, you know, she was not executed or anything, and in fact, after her death, a Bible and a last will and testament were found in her cottage. But still, I felt this almost like this calling through time. It's like, I know this woman. I wanted to be friends with her. And I think that might have started all of it. However, I wasn't like officially initiated as a witch until I guess it was 12. I know I was 12 because I had just gotten my period for the first time, and I had all sorts of really conflicted, polarized feelings about being a woman for obvious reasons. So it wasn't something that I took any spiritual significance from or anything like that. However, my mom, God, her whole spiritual journey is its own story, but after she and my dad stopped going to church, because my dad's an atheist, she was looking for something, so she started going to this Episcopalian church and found where the rector was a woman. And she went by the name of Mother Glenn. She also claimed to be a druid. Now, before we go on, I have come to understand that Druidism is not just a dead practice, it's a dead language. Because there were no sacred texts, nothing was written down in the practice of Druids. It was all an oral tradition passed down with words spoken. However, in efforts to Christianize the island of Ireland, I'm not sure if they were all killed off, but there was a significant effort put into stopping those that language and the stories and the traditions from making it to the next generation, and they did do that successfully. So nobody can speak the Druid language because nobody knows what it sounds like. And I get it. People want to, honor that, I guess. And there are some Druidic things that are known, but just if anybody tells you they're a Druid, they're probably not. I don't know how that would even work. But how did she find out that I think I wanted, there was a church event or something, and I wanted to do a fortune telling thing, which was very witchy. And so she took an interest in me, and she actually gave me my first wand. It was an applewood wand with the Ogham symbol for apple carved into it. And she also gave me a couple books on witchcraft that were bullshit. But I didn't know that at the time. However, I did, she gave me this one book, I think it was called, it doesn't matter, American Folk Magic, by a woman named Silver Ravenwolf. And even at 12, I was like, I don't think I can take anything seriously if it's written by a white lady who calls herself Silver Raven Wolf, which was good because that is a Wiccan text, and I have nothing against practitioners of Wicca. I am not Wiccan, and I take issue with anybody thinking that I'm Wiccan. Frankly, Wiccan traditions were created in like the 60s by white women, which is the white women part, whatever, but just Wicca draws very little from actual traditional practices, and I do draw a lot from actual traditional practices. Anyway, it's a long thing. So I told my mom, obviously, that I got my period, and I was just like, hey mom, I got my period, we need pads. And a few days later, I guess, some of my mom's friends came over, including Mother Glenn and a lesbian couple who were also very, very involved in the church. And Mother Glenn's husband, Father Bill, who preferred to be called Oakwise, which is a great name for a wizard in the Tolkienverse, but not necessarily for a guy whose bald spot is rapidly encroaching upon his ponytail. And then I found out that they weren't there to see my mom. They were there for my period party, which I was so goddamn fucking mortified. I did not feel initiated. I didn't feel like this was a witchy thing at all, partially because my mom was there. And Father Bill gave me a jar of body oil that he had made himself. I was 12. Mother Glenn gave me a beautiful like moon necklace, and the couple gave me like a journal or whatever. But we didn't like if we had like had some sort of ritual and like maybe like gone out in nature or anything, that might have been cool, but we were all just sort of sitting there not sure what to talk about. Nobody really seemed to know what the point was, including my mom. I think my mom just sort of thought that things would fall into place, or that maybe Mother Glenn would just... Anyway, that was my initiation. It was really, really awkward. When my little sister got her period, she came up to my mom and was like, I don't have to have a period party, right? Which I wish I had the option to ask for that. However, when puberty really hit, the psychological stuff, and I started having, suicidal ideation, and was so depressed, and essentially, like, I wasn't really connected to myself. I was also, like, highly medicated for the rest of my high school career, and kind of dropped off with the witchcraft until my second year of college, when I had my psychedelic awakening, which was great, and I'm still glad that it happened. However, after the first time I took LSD, I mean, it changed my life and the way that I saw myself and the way that I saw the world around me in an extremely positive way. However, I also decided that I didn't need psychiatric medication anymore, which in theory is great. I had also been taking Klonopin for some time, and I'm going to make a video about that at some point. Klonopin is a benzodiazepine. Sudden cessation of benzodiazepines is just as dangerous as alcohol withdrawal. And I started having seizures. And I had like a break. It wasn't a psychotic break. I wasn't psychotic, but I didn't sleep for 5 days. And I ended up making an attempt on my life, and I had to leave school. However, I did continue using psychedelics to this day. Even now, I don't really trip, but I do microdose, and that has been extremely helpful for me. And I'm a huge advocate of psychedelic therapy, but psychedelic therapy means with a therapist, with somebody, with a guide, and who has training, which is not how I went about it. I also, at that time, I had already like when we covered ancient Egypt in school, I was obsessed with. That was how I got like my mythology thing. I'm obsessed with mythology. I loved Anubis. I loved this idea of a guide for the dead, and I made canopic jars and mummified my American Girl doll for the unit that we did on that. And canopic jars were used in funerary rites. Each jar contained a different organ. So there's that. Anyway, I felt really connected to Coyote. And I know I'm white. I do not consider... I don't venerate Coyote the way that he is venerated in, like, tribally, because I don't know how they do that, and I wouldn't want to. Those practices are closed to me. For me, Coyote is like the American trickster god. There's also Brer Rabbit, but Coyote really appealed to me, partially because of Animal Man and the Coyote Gospel. Check it out if you haven't; it's really good. However, I not only do I find Coyote to be a trickster god, but a scavenger god, and a god of abandoned places, which I've always loved. And especially since I set up his altar, I have the best sidewalk ground scores ever. I found not just a work, but a really nice record player that somebody had just left out for some reason. Also, I think it was the same day, a brand new HP printer in the box. And then it works, so that's pretty cool. I thought of, like, I referred to that period of my life as Coyote Rising. Let's see. Oh, then, after... God, I went to that school, I went to a different school, I had another bad time, and then up and moved to Colorado for 6 months. And before I did, I got this tattoo, which is a symbol of Loki, the Norse trickster god. I think part of me just didn't think that, anything would come of it spiritually. And another part of me was just sort of kicking a hornet's nest, just like, well, I guess I'll find out if this is a real thing. It's not a good idea to call I think of Loki as the most malicious of the trickster gods, and not just because of what happened with me, but because of the mythology. So my life exploded after I came back from Colorado, and right. Sorry. There was also, after all of the bad stuff that happened at my college and I left, my mom had moved on in her spiritual journey to yoga and Eastern religion, and the sort of whitewashed, westernized Buddhism that you get in America. And she had started going to this center called Kripalu to train to become a yoga instructor, but it was also like an Ayurvedic institute. It had classes on all sorts of like Buddhism, spirituality, yoga, Ayurveda, herbalism, all sorts of shit. So she sent me there for shaman training. Now, you'll notice I have never called myself a shaman, and I never will. That's not a word for me. That's not a word for fucking white Americans. That's not ours. However, the tradition that we were learning about and being trained in is called Munai. It's Peruvian shamanism. She sent me to this woman who called herself the Glitter Shaman of Westchester, who also taught me a lot about Munai, which, and she did regularly take students and other people that she was training to Peru for ayahuasca ceremonies, and she wanted to take me too. But I was on meds, and I couldn't. That I would have had to get off of them. But so what I'm getting at with that is that ostensibly she had been initiated by Peruvian shamans into Munai practice, which in my mind means that it was open to her, because she was initiated. Anyway, I won't get too far into Munai shamanism. However, it's a lot of it is about the 6 directions, including up and down, or skyward and earthward, and each direction has a sort of not avatar. God, hold on, I hate this archetype. Each one had like a different archetype. For instance, the one that I really felt connected to was the direction of west was associated with Mother, Sister, Jaguar, and Mother, Sister, Jaguar teaches us that about things that scare us. Oh God, I'm trying to remember. Shadow work in many ways, and it's been so long I can't remember the exact wording, but each direction was like that. And I mentioned this because after in 2011, when I moved back into my parents' basement after my ex almost beat me to death, I at first, like I guess in many ways I stagnated, I just rotted. However, I was on some level processing things spiritually, because I would go out into this one little spot in my parents' backyard that I called my dirt garden. And just like a stone circle, and whatever grew there could grow there. If I accidentally broke something like glass, I would bring the glass out there and like arrange it. And I would do the rituals that I was taught involving honoring the 6 directions and stuff like that. And I do believe that that helped me quite a lot spiritually. Who knows? Also during this time, a friend of mine who I had known in Brattleboro was also renting a room from my parents, and we had a couple interesting experiences that I think had more to do with me being on cough syrup and him being very suggestible than anything else. However, I do want to mention it. His best friend had passed on years ago, and I once asked, like, I wanted to draw a picture of him, and I'd never seen him, and I never have. I asked what he looked like, and Max said, like, he looks sort of like Nick Cave. And that was all I knew, and I drew a portrait of him with my left hand, which I'm not left-handed. I've done a couple of left-handed drawings, though, that I quite like. And that again, that was in 2011, but to this day, Max still has that picture framed in his office because of how much it looked like him. And then later that night, I was smoking a clove cigarette, and he asked, "Hey, Dave," Dave was the name. Why was it again that he didn't like Sadie smoking in the trailer? And without hesitation, I said in a voice that was not my own, apparently, fucking stunk up the place. And of course, I never knew anything about this man. I didn't know who this person was, etc., etc. So that was ooky spooky a little bit. But I do feel hugely connected to death deities and to those who have passed on, not in a direct communication way, just in a sort of an intuition way. So that was cool. Speaking of different fields of witchcraft, I also have always felt deeply connected to fire. And some of you might have already seen my video about being a teenage arsonist. I also just, as a young kid, I used to burn things. Not starting fires, but like lighting a candle or even like lighting a stick on fire and just observing it and then putting it out. It was safe. But yeah, always felt hugely connected to the element of fire. And there was one time in 2012 that I had the opportunity to spin fire for the first time, fire poi. And that is another of its own story. However, I knew that I wanted to do it again after I got a 3rd-degree burn because my belt had caught on fire. And even that didn't stop me. I just put the poi down, patted it out, and then kept going. I spun fire all night. And I still wanted to do it again. And I've only done it one other time, but that was just cool. I felt that it was that was a spiritual experience, and I just wanted to mention this connection to fire. Let's see. Deities. Now, even though I loved Anubis and did feel a connection with Coyote and knew that there was a connection, or had experiences with Loki. I had never, I didn't work with deities. I didn't venerate or worship any deities until 2020 maybe, and that was a cool experience where somebody had given me 2 hawk talons. She had worked at a wildlife sanctuary, and it would have been like a hawk that had died, and she gave me the 2 talons, and I treated them with borax so that I'll get it. Oh, you're not being entertained while I'm away. Oh, I've lost my whole audience. So that they clutch this piece of red jasper here, and I was so proud of it. But then after I made it, I wanted to show it to somebody, and I couldn't fucking find it. I lived in one room, but I couldn't fucking find it. And I was just sort of like, and as I was looking for it, I thought to myself, like, I haven't given any sort of thanks, or like done any like work spiritually to do with this. So I did know about Cernunnos, who is the Irish, like the horned god, the wild god of the hunt, usually symbolized by deer. And before I kept looking, I went around my neighborhood and just collected like evergreen branches of trees that are associated with him, and made like a little I made an altar to him. I had a deer skull, I had a couple things, and I made that altar. And then not only did I almost immediately find the talon, I also ended up finding like 3 hits of LSD that I thought that I had lost, which made the whole situation a lot more psychedelic, and that was really cool. Not long after that, I started feeling a pull from Hecate, which makes sense. She is the Greek goddess of witchcraft, divination, plant magic, anything else, stuff, and crossroads, which is awesome because like I love a crossroads deity, and I've always really loved. I believe it's Papa Legba, who is the voodoo crossroads god. But voodoo was very, 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 very not okay for me to practice. I'm descended from slave owners. I know this. I would not do that. I think it would not go well for me. But she is a crossroads goddess who I can, work with. And I started working with her around the time that I started my business, which is Wittershin's Goods, which is, I didn't intend for this when I started the business. I thought it was going to be just jewelry. But mostly what people buy from me are spell bottles. In fact, if you're interested, my most popular one that's really popular is called the Fuck Around, Find Out, Return to Sender Protection Bottle. And that was the first one that I ever designed, and it is effective. Just read my reviews. Anyway, right, Hecate. My experiences with Hecate aren't as like wild and sort of anarchic as with Cernunnos, but very not real, but like I felt such a certain presence that was very specific, and it was the most that I've ever like called to a deity and then been like, oh, you're here, huh? Like, and I really adore her. Since then, I have ancestral ties to Ireland. So I also work with the Morrigan, who, if you're not familiar, every pantheon has like a father god, Zeus, Ra, etc. And most of them have a counterpart fertility goddess who is married to, Hera, that kind of thing. Ireland doesn't have that. Ireland has the Dagda, that's your dad, who has the cauldron that never empties, and he's very paternal and very benevolent, but he's married to a triple goddess of death and blood and the battlefield named the Morrigan. And she is not. This is not a maiden mother crone situation. These are different aspects of battle, essentially, or fear and stuff like that. And she is known to like appear on the battlefield as a massive raven and just turn the tide of the battle. She's associated with ravens and crows, and I really like I'm not somebody who really curses people. I have cursed one person, my landlord. He deserved it, and I have no idea whether anything came of it or not. But that's who you. She is wrath, protection too, but very much like wrath and baneful stuff. So but I feel such a connection to her, partially because anger wasn't something that I was allowed to express growing up. However, I do have a very powerful sense of anger that not so much when people wrong me as much as when I witness injustice. And she gives voice, I guess, to that side of me. Right, so I have a couple more altars. I've got one for, let's see, there's Hecate, Cernunnos, Coyote. Back here I have Dionysus, although he's going through a bit of a renovation. I love Dionysus. I've always been really into this idea of sacred madness. And he embodies that. Then in the other room I have one for Loki, and a small one for Athena, who I called upon for help when I was moving into this apartment and was just going through a lot, and she pulled through for me. And then the Morrigans is in my bedroom. That's it, right? Yeah. So I only really and even those, even like Hecate and Cernunnos, who I actively worship and actively sort of invoke sometimes, I don't do it very often. Hecate probably the most, just because she has a lot to do with, I'm a witch professionally, so I don't feel comfortable practicing witchcraft without asking for her blessing and giving thanks to her. Doobity-doo, is that it? I have a little list of bullet points. That is it, and then there's I guess I haven't talked about how my take on magic, which is a little bit nuanced. I'm a big believer in sympathetic magic, which in Terry Pratchett's world, his witches, who are some of the best witches I've ever, read about, Granny Weatherwax calls it headology, which, psychology, but also, for instance, if somebody has really wronged you, and you go up to them and pull like a jar out of your pocket and break it in front of them, and like while reciting Latin, and you're screaming it, and you cultivate, it might not independently make bad things happen to that person, but they're gonna think of you every time something bad happens to them for a long time, that's sort of how sympathetic magic works. And again, I am a big believer in that. And another way that sympathetic magic works is, I know that even if my spells don't do anything, don't alter anything, just having a physical reminder of what your intention is very powerful. I also, I don't go in for woo-woo witchcraft stuff, and I'm not a big woo-woo person. I'm a big believer in science. However, Nikola Tesla did say, if you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency. And it is 100% true that different crystal structures do vibrate at different frequencies. And I'm not going to say that doesn't do something. it would make sense to me if there was some sort of validity to different crystals being good for different things. I do feel, I mean, I'm like a magpie with labradorite. I love labradorite so much, and I have so much joy with labradorite. And so whether it's headology or not, I do my spell bottles are mostly crystals and different plants and herbs and animal parts. I'm a big believer in like bones especially, but zoological curios, and they're something about them. So, and I think that I am the only Etsy witch who uses those. Yes, I am an Etsy witch. Not, I didn't curse was Charlie Kirk. I was not the witch who cursed Charlie Kirk, but I'm not going to take credit for that, but I'm supportive of the witch who did. Let's see. Anything? Oh, yeah, speaking of which, I don't disbelieve in like spells, like like going to a book and finding a spell that somebody else wrote down and then recreating that spell with the same intention. That might work. I've never really done it, frankly. My when I do spell work, it's all about improvised. It's all intuitive, and it has a lot to do with energy, just how things feel. So like when I like work magic, I don't necessarily cast a circle. I don't have an altar with an Adame and a goblet and what else? Shit like an offering bowl, the way that Wiccans sort of do. But when I feel shit, I feel it, and I do. I let that guide me, which has gone really well for me. I've also, aside from aside from when I was like in 5th grade, I am solitary in my practice. I've never been interested in coven work or group stuff. Partially just a lot of people in that community just get on my nerves. The kind of people who like empathy is a real thing, but some people call themselves empaths because they decide how somebody feels and then argue with them if they're wrong. That kind of thing. And people who sort of see themselves as a persecuted minority and talk about the burning times as though like that's something that happened to witches. It didn't. It happened to just regular people. And oh god, it's there's a lot that gets on my nerves about it. And also, like, I never was comfortable going to church. Never felt really comfortable in group worship. All of my spirituality is all solitary. And just having another person around me when I'm doing that would really affect. It's just then it doesn't feel the same. And their energy just sort of gets all over it, I guess. I've never used that phrasing, but yeah, I'm entirely solitary in my practice. And one reason that I love witchcraft is there's no doctrine. There are, it's not the kind of thing that you need to consult with somebody else to see if you're doing it right. And I recognize and really I understand the incredible cultural value of congregations and organized religion because of the community that they offer. That's just not how my spirituality is. I like the idea of being part of a community like that. It just, for me, again, I can only really do it. I can only really get shit done with it when I'm doing it by myself and according to my own system of beliefs, I guess. And speaking of beliefs, I am allergic to the idea that what's true for me is necessarily true for somebody else. So, like, all of my beliefs with witchcraft are my beliefs for me. And I'm not going to tell somebody that what works for me is going to work for them. I also am not the kind of person who criticizes people for believing in God. I think that everybody has their own spiritual life, and the rules of that spiritual life are as varied as the people who have spiritual lives. So that's also a thing. I love religion, though. I love studying it. I love talking about it. I love learning about religions. I'm also ascribed to a belief called Omnism, which teaches that no one religion has a monopoly on truth, but that truth can be found in every religion. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of it. Yeah, I guess that's kind of it. I would love to know about, nobody ever comments on my videos. People, like, I get 10 people who will like a video. No, I've never had people actually discuss stuff, but I would love it if y'all. Oh, I just reminded myself of something. I forgot all about chaos magic, which I'm not going to get too into it, just because that does have not structure, but like there's a lot going on in chaos magic that haven't researched and shit like that. But what I do practice in chaos magic is building and using sigils, which some people act like there are hard and fast rules to designing sigils. In, like, for instance, like writing out your statement of intent and then crossing out all the vowels and all the repeat letters, and then arranging the remaining letters into a symbol. That's how a lot of people do it, and that is how I do it. But it's just the idea is to put your intent into a symbol and sort of have that symbol around. The goal is almost to forget what it means, but the symbol itself is like the invocation almost. That's the best I got regarding, and that, again, that's something that, whether or not there's magic afoot with that, there's, psychologically speaking, there's a lot to be said for having a symbol that consistently reminds you of your goal. Just psychologically, that's cool. I recently gave myself a tattoo of my, really the only sigil that I really have worked with for years and years and years, which I forget if it's supposed to be taboo to share with people the phrase that this is inspired from is "I manifest my will," and that's a big thing in chaos magic. Is it's all about your will and sort of bending the universe to your will. And if that sounds a little ooky spooky to you, think about it's like, turning a light on is bending the universe to your will. It's like, I want this room to be lighted. You manifest that by switching a light bulb. And that's literally what manifestation is. So, oh God, I guess Samhain is just, I feel like a devotee of Samhain. And Mabon too. There's, in Hinduism you have the big three, like there's Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer. I've always been very, very comfortable with destruction as a whole. In college, I developed this school of thought, informally, that I called entropism, which is just, entropy is the tendency of all matter to break down and decay. And, for anything to be created, things have to be destroyed, and destruction is essential for, in life, etc. I'm also I'm also fine with creation. I like creation a lot. It's preservation that I really struggle with, although I'm getting a lot better And right, so that's sort of the time of year. And when people talk about like maiden mother crone stuff, I don't really go into that because it really is reducing, like it's reducing women and witches to whether or not their bodies are reproducing. You know, so but it's like using that phrasing, I'm not like into the maiden aspect, but I am into the crone aspect. I love the like. There's this symbol in that's ancient in Ireland that existed before Christianity was there, and even there are a lot of churches where if you know where to look, there is a Sheila na gig somewhere there, and a Sheila na gig is this an image of a crone, and in it she's like legs up, pussy out, and she's holding it open, and that is, you know, it's all about the magic that has nothing to do with reproduction and femininity outside of sexuality and outside of motherhood. And I love that. I love the audacity of it. I love the, you know, this is, you know, entirely unappealing to the male gaze, and it's here anyway. I always, though, have been very uncomfortable with the mother bit. I love nurturing creatures, and I love caring for others, and I would love to raise a kid that I don't have to give birth to someday, maybe. It's, however, because of my relationship with my own mom, I think maybe that's a big part of it, and giving birth is one of my biggest fears. Being pregnant and giving birth, I have nightmares about it. So that's a thing also. But I'm glad that I remembered to talk about the Sheila again, because that's a big, I don't know. I think it's a really big, it's an archetype that I really vibe with. Like, the older I get, the more like myself I feel, and I can't wait until I'm an aged old man, woman, or whatever, and my power isn't associated with anything to do with my appeal to men. Even though I for better or worse, usually worse, I'm really only attracted to men. But not that men and women are all that different beyond, you know, we're different because we're socialized differently. But I also want to mention that, like, I'm not feminine at all. Never have been. And the witch archetype is really the only way that I feel connected to femininity at all. So that's another thing. And I guess that is it. I believe that's it. Happy Halloween, Blessed Samhain. Go out there and have a really awesome ooky spooky time. I guess, it's almost an hour long. However, Halloween is just, like, incredible to me. The suspension of social norms is, I think, a big thing of it for me, because even the social norms that I am aware of, I spit in the face of. I hate social convention. And I love just anything to do with playing, especially playing with presentation, playing with the, like, rules of engagement, and just, like, I feel like, I'm just a servant of Halloween. Who said that? Was it B.B. King? I don't remember. Anyway, go be spooky, guys. I love you. Goodbye.